On this edition, I'm just going to recap Rampage Jackson following UFC on Fox 6 card, which obviously took place last night. Now, I know going into this fight, I know Rampage Jackson's had his doubters for quite a few fights. I know he's obviously had his very strong following as well. People either love or they hate Rampage Jackson. And, Rampage Jackson is one of the fighters I followed. When I first got into mixed martial arts, UFC, Pride, whatever it be. But what I saw last night, and this is just me in particular, I know some people thought the Texeira versus Rampage fight was boring, and I'm not saying it's fight of the year, but based on some of the particular things going into this fight, like the fights in the past that we've seen from Rampage Jackson, the Bader fight, John Jones fight, it's almost been uninspired fighting, lack of heart, and I hate to question heart from a particular fighter, but the way I see it is that what I've been looking for from Rampage is obviously everybody talks about the Rampage of old. Hope the Rampage of old from Pride shows up and he knocks somebody out. I actually thought that Rampage would pull off the knockout yesterday on Glover Texeira based on the aggressive style of Glover playing right into Rampage's obviously counter-striking style. He just doesn't have the speed anymore to be on the offensive and catch fighters. Like he used to do against Liddell and everything that he did in the past in Pride. It's just that's not the type of fighter he is anymore. And he's almost tried to become more of a technical striker. But what I really took away from last night, what I truly do respect is that sure, there's all the BS leading up to the fight from Rampage. I hope Glover doesn't take me down, and it's been something that's led up to plenty of fights, especially the fight with Bader, with Jones, and obviously with Glover Texeira. Talk about how he doesn't want to get caught up in the ground game. Well, that's mixed martial arts. I think we all understand the ground game is very much a huge aspect of the sport itself. But what I do respect is the fact that Rampage Jackson fought inspired yesterday. I don't want to say he so much redefined himself. Sure, he was completely exhausted at the end of the fight. Not even in the middle of the fight, completely exhausted, but so very much was Glover Texeira. Obviously, he was just a little bit more fresh than Rampage Jackson, but what I saw was a guy who didn't quit yesterday. I saw a fighter who tried to bring the fight all up until the final bell went off. Just after 3 rounds, Rampage Jackson really did give it his all. I personally see it that way, and obviously I know some people didn't, but I saw a guy who fought with a lot of heart. I saw a guy with no quit mentality. I saw a guy who it looked like almost it was his last fight in the UFC, which most of us are obviously thinking it is his last fight in the UFC, whether he goes on the Bellator, or boxing, whatever he's mentioned doing. But I think Rampage Jackson will have a good career outside of the UFC, if he chooses to go outside of the UFC. But that's just what I've been looking for, is just a guy who wanted to leave it all in the octagon. We always hear I'm in the best shape of my life and all this other stuff. Obviously, he's getting up there in age, 34 years old. Obviously, there's plenty of fighters at 34 that fight a lot more fresh than Rampage Jackson. But I saw a fighter with a lot of heart, and that's really what I wanted to see. I wanted to see somebody almost go out on their shield, and Rampage Jackson gave it his all, especially earlier on in that fight when he took quite a few shots, and everybody's saying, oh, Rampage Jackson's going to get knocked out. Obviously, it's the hype train that's behind Glover Texeira, but I will forever respect Rampage Jackson, given that it could very well be his last fight in the UFC, and he really did give it his all. Whether it's a win or loss, sometimes those things are meaningless based on the effort that you put into it. And regardless of whether he gassed out in that fight or not, he was still standing and giving it to Glover at the very end of that fight. There was no quit in him, and that's something that a lot of people question his career. Rashad questioning Rampage Jackson against Shogun back in the Pride days, but I saw a guy that wanted to give it his all and really put an exclamation point on the final fight in his UFC career, and that's whether he continues forward with the UFC or not. So regardless of all the stuff outside the octagon, I tip my cap to Rampage Jackson. I still consider him a legend of the sport. Maybe more for what he did back in Pride. I know he did steal the light heavyweight title from Chuck Liddell, but that's just how I see it. I was thoroughly impressed last night, and that's what I've been looking for, just a guy who fought inspired. And that's what I saw from Rampage Jackson. Being a fan of his and obviously a fan of the sport, I have nothing but the utmost respect for Rampage Jackson. Do wish him the best wherever he pursues his career following the UFC, and that's if he chooses to leave the UFC. I tip my cap to Rampage Jackson. Thank you for everything you've done in the UFC, the good times, the bad. But wish you the best wherever he goes. So that's just my take on Rampage Jackson's fight with Glover Texeira in general. So that's what I have for this edition. It's Kyle Delaney signing off. I'm out of here.